Please go ahead, sir. We are live now.
Thank you. Uh, a very good afternoon to everyone. I have great pleasure to welcome our chief guest, Sri Sudhendu Sinha, Advisor Infrastructure, Connectivity, Transport and Electric Mobility Niti Aayog, to this webinar on incentivization of auto industry for advanced manufacturing. I also welcome Mr. R.S. Kalsi, Chairman, National Council on Auto and Auto Ancillaries, ASSOCHAM, and Member, Executive Board, Maruti Suzuki India Limited. Mr. Egmont David Oret, Head Industry 4.0 Innovation Lab, LET Lab, Ultra Clean Technology, NOF, Hegalil, Israel, our international guest this afternoon. Welcome. Mr. Krishna Kumar, Managing Director and CEO, Siram Pistons and Rings. Mr. Asim Sharma, Partner and Group Head, Business Process Improvement Group, NRI Consulting and Solutions India Private Limited. Mr. Shankar Achrekar, Deputy General Manager, Mahindra and Mahindra Limited. Mr. Venkateswaran Sundar, Head Automotive OE and EV Business, JK Fanner India Limited. Mr. Sunil Bhatnagar, Director International Business Emerging Technologies, Sunwaru Technology Limited. Squadron Leader Prerna Chaturvedi, Veteran Indian Air Force, Co-founder and Director, Evolet India. Mr. Anandi Sinha, President Group Corporate Affairs, Minda Industries. So a very warm welcome to all the eminent speakers. I also welcome all the participants to this webinar this afternoon. In the interest of time, to move on, I would now request Mr. Kalsi, Chairman of the Council, to kindly share his views and also moderate the session. Mr. Sinha from Niti Aayog will be joining shortly. Meanwhile, we can begin the discussion, please.
Here, Shri Sudhendu Sinha, Mr. D.S. Rajora, Assistant Secretary General, ASSOCHAM, eminent speakers from the industry, ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to all of you, and I extend a warm welcome to all of you. In fact, really warm today in Delhi afternoon. Hope all of you are in good health and taking proper care as we pass through the third wave of COVID-19. Friends, industry has come across various challenges during the COVID pandemic. I would like to mention that auto industry has stood sturdy, sailed through the turbulence, bounced back, and supported the government during this tough period as well. Friends, I must compliment ASSOCHAM team for taking up the topic of advanced manufacturing in auto industry for today's deliberations. I request all the participants to meaningfully contribute in making this webinar constructive towards policy making in our country. Auto industry is the backbone of India's manufacturing GDP. Majority of the developed economies of our world have gone through a period of very high manufacturing growth. The examples are Germany, France, USA, Japan, and recently China and South Korea. In all of these countries, we'll find presence of a very strong automotive industry. Their auto industries have grown at a CAGR ranging from 15% to 25%. If we talk about the recent phenomena of last 15 to 20 years. If we look at our country, CAGR of India's car industry has gone down from 10% in the first decade of this century to 3.6% in the second decade. Of course, there are certain aberrations where in a particular year we had a double-digit growth, but then there were subsequent years where we had degrowth or a flat growth. But if we talk about 10 years, it is about 3.6%, which is quite a dismal growth for a country like ours, which offers such big opportunities in terms of the vehicle ownership. The scenario is very similar in other vehicle segments as well, whether we talk about two-wheeler industry, three-wheelers, and commercial vehicles. Friends, India's auto industry has been going through structural slowdown in the last 3 years. It is important to mention that this slowdown is not related to COVID-19. The slowdown, in fact, started 1 year before the onset of pandemic. For example, if I talk about sales of entry-level cars in India in financial year 2019-2020, it was down by nearly 60% when we compare it with 2010-2011 financial year. Our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, and his government has well recognized the importance of manufacturing sector for India's economic prosperity. The government has taken many initiatives to promote manufacturing in the country, like Make in India, Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, and very recently, the production-linked incentive scheme for various manufacturing industries. I'm confident that PLI scheme will accelerate investments and job opportunities in the auto industry. It will also make our country Atmanirbhar in the manufacturing of various advanced automotive technology components. Last week, Ministry of Heavy Industry announced results of champion OEM scheme of PLI. It is very heartening to see that leading OEMs of all vehicle segments have been approved under the scheme. PLI scheme will prove to be a game changer in achieving Honorable Prime Minister's vision of making manufacturing 25% of our country's GDP. Other areas where industry seeks consistent and continuous support from the government are ease of doing business, long-term regulatory roadmap for auto industry, as frequent changes in this regulatory roadmap put a lot of burden to the extent of billions of rupees on the auto industry, then supporting auto industry to grow at double digit. Also, auto industry fondly welcomes the various announcements in this year's budget. Government's impetus on growth is well echoed in our industry colleagues' voice. Now, ASSOCHAM and its members also look forward to working with government for various initiatives like battery swapping, zero fossil fuel zone announced in the budget. For the component champion scheme of PLI, many of our industry members have concerns regarding the eligibility criteria like minimum threshold investment, localization content, and the list of advanced automotive technology parts. On behalf of ASSOCHAM, I would like to request Ministry of Heavy Industries and the related government bodies, particularly Niti Aayog, to positively look towards addressing these concerns. As envisioned by our Honorable Prime Minister, our country will script a great story of growth and economic prosperity in the decades ahead. I'm fully confident that our auto industry will make significant contributions in this direction. Once again, friends, I am grateful to the team at ASSOCHAM for creating this excellent platform of dialogue between industry and the government. Let us all work together in making this decade the decade of India. I look forward to very positive and constructive deliberations in the next 1.5 hours from all of you. Thank you. Over to Mr. Rajuram.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So, may I now request our international guest, Mr. Egmont David Poret, Head Industry 4.0 Innovation Lab, Lab Ultra Clean Technology, and of Hegalil, Israel, to please give his perspective on the subject. Welcome, please.
Thank you for having me. I unmuted myself, so I hope you hear me. I think it's a very, first of all, it's a very interesting topic by itself. We know the whole industrial landscape is going a revolution now, the Industry 4.0. which basically in a nutshell means that a variety of industries can introduce new innovation in their products and in the way they manufacture. And the car industry is no different. I was requested to talk a little bit about government support and what kind of schemes are there that we promote in Israel, entrepreneurs or other individuals to accelerate the innovation and adoption in the automotive industry. So first let me introduce myself. My name is Agmon Porat. I'm running an innovation lab inside UCT. UCT is one of the fastest growing OEMs for semiconductor industry. So we're not in the auto industry, but we've been running an innovation lab in the field of Industry 4.0 under the license of the government. So we got incentives from the governments to spend money from our company, which was a manufacturing company with low margins before we became UCT, to find innovations, which includes, in our case, it was robotics, AI, automations, innovations that are related to us, and leverage the money in. And as you know, Israel and India have also several programs where we encourage cross bilateral innovations, where in the nutshell, in all the programs, even the program that we got from the government to invest in startups, as well as the startups themselves that getting the money and the incentives to develop new ideas, work on the same concept, which is the government takes the risk. It would leverage money from other entrepreneurs. It would leverage an entrepreneur's time to develop an innovative idea, and very quickly to using bodies like ourselves, like other innovation centers, to evaluate different technologies that are related and invest in them. And the government takes the risk in a sense. And I'll give you an example. So we opened the innovation hub, and we got an incentive from the government to get a return back, cash back from what we invested, 50% of what we invested, to run the lab, to hire one guy like myself to track innovations and track the relevant people inside the organization, the champions internally, that would use the startups, and then fund the pilot itself or develop the technology itself. Everything is around innovation and something that is a barrier for others, either letting the factory itself implement innovation or developing a new product. Having said that, in Israel itself, there are a variety of schemes for accelerating innovation in the field of automotive, but any other, and it's taking the risk, one. Second is moving knowledge from where you have the knowledge to where you need the knowledge. And sometimes a lot of people think about moving the knowledge from academia into the industry, from, again, schemes that says, okay, the government is going to take the risk, it's going to put a lot of the money, the industrial company is going to put 10%, 10 to 20% the tops, the university gets the funds, the PhD or postdoctorate is working on commercialization. It's not research, it's basically it's commercialization. And there are several companies are built together around one money. They're getting X amount of money, all the companies together, to develop a specific challenge in that specific industry. And I'll give you an example. One of our startups was participating in a consortium of companies that get funds from the government. It's little funds. It's about something like $2 million. But it goes mostly to the researchers and to the virtualize the need itself. So in a nutshell, to drive innovation, usually large manufacturing companies don't want to take the risk. Automotive companies, if we're talking about automotive, and it's from designing a truck or designing an AGV, they are going a revolution itself, and they don't like risk as well, right? So some companies know they have to make a shift moving, for example, the electrical car, and the fact that cars and automotives are moving to software, and we need this security and cyber security, and AI in making the cars autonomous and making them electrical. And those who are not making the changes basically are going to be left behind. By the way, a lot of automotive companies decided to open an R&D centers in Israel simply because of that leverage. Suddenly startups are working on innovations for the R&D with lower risks, right? Because again, the government is taking some of the risk. The reason the government is taking the risk and saying, okay, Agmon, first of all, you made your case and you had to compete comparing to other industries that said, okay, we want to open an innovation lab. We're going to give this to the startups. We're going to give them free office space. We're going to give them a playing ground. We're going to connect them to the product market fit and to the right person. We dedicated a person that is going in a team that is going to scout for technology and scout for new ideas. And we would do better job compared to others. And we competed compared to Kimberly-Clark and Siemens and others. Our case won, so we opened an innovation hub. Now we are seeking startups, and the minute we found a startup that is relevant, the government is taking the risk because it says, okay, we'll evaluate the startup. Is it has an innovation, a strong innovation? Does the team can do it and build it? Okay, we'll take the risk. And that means that we would put $150K, that's something like $40,000. And then the government gave another $260,000. Okay, so it's a good ratio. It's 15 to 85%. So it's like they're really taking the risk, but they still want us to put skin in the game and have 15, so we'll have an interest. And the startup has no risk, right? What happened in the past if we wanted to open a startup or a company, if we wouldn't succeed, they would take our house, they would, I don't know, make us become slave or whatever. Now, if we don't succeed, you're an entrepreneur, you get even a better job in a larger company, and you don't risk all your money, right? And that's the whole point of the government. And they're doing it so there would be a lot of startups that many of them are going to fail. Many of them, statistically, more than 90% are going to fail. But along the way, they raised funds. They worked on some of the biggest problems. They failed the startup and said, okay, you know what? The founder was an idiot. I'm going to found my own startup. And suddenly a new startup comes up 5 years later that reinvents the batteries or whatever. So I think incentivize from the government. I gave here a stream about two different ideas. One of them is having funds that are going to a group of companies together with a university or academic centers to solve a specific challenge or to build an infrastructure. The second one is building innovation hubs that are focused on one specific area, automotives in this case. So I hope it shed light, and I'm inviting anybody who has any questions or to connect with me even on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to share some reports or connect you to specific offering or pilots that the Israel Innovation Authority did. So there are some examples there. Every stream is very simple. It's like a 2-page, explanation, and then the one Word document and one Excel document that the startup is developing or the company is developing. And there's a clear process of decision, and that's what we're doing here. I hope this answers some of the questions. Be happy to shed some more light if you wish.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Porat, for highlighting innovation in the industry. And indeed, the government support is needed for the next level manufacturing in the sector. And
yes, but also the manufacturers themselves, right? The companies themselves, if they don't implement innovation, if they don't hire somebody that is looking for the innovation and it's not part of R&D processes. R&D is long term and it's small processes. Driving several projects, even even in the R&D, but that are innovative in the production and in the product are necessary to stay alive nowadays. Otherwise, you'll become obsolete as a manufacturer.
Yeah, we do agree with you. Thank you so much.
Very good.
And to move on now, I would request Mr. S. Krishna Kumar, Managing Director and CEO, Sriram Pistons and Rings, to kindly give his perspective on the subject.
Yeah, sure. I hope you are able to hear me well. Okay.
Yes, sir. Perfect.
Thank you. So, Mr. Sudhendu Sinha, Mr. Rajora, Mr. Kalsi, and a lot of my other colleagues in the panel. It gives me great pleasure to be addressing this particular topic on the incentivization of the advanced technologies required in the auto sector. First and foremost, let's see what the government has done so far and what has been good for the entire industry. I think overall the PLI scheme is very welcome, and I think it is a big boost to the industry. It will give a big boost to the domestic manufacturing in the country for all advanced automotive technologies. And at the same time, what is going to happen is it's going to also ensure that some of the cost disabilities that have been existing in the system is taken care of with the help of this support that the government is extending. And the government is looking, the way the whole scheme has been framed clearly indicates the government is looking at scale. They are not looking at very small manufacturing. They are looking at almost on all these areas of advanced technologies. They are looking that India will scale up to the requirement and will be able to not only satisfy the local Indian needs, but also take care of some of the global requirements to ensure that we are able to improve our exports and bridge our big trade deficit that we have between the imports and exports today. Ideally, the government has looked at ensuring that the whole scheme has been front-ended, looking clearly at investments, and I think that's the right thing to do, because it clearly shows that the government is looking at investments to come in and to ensure that we are able to use that investments towards manufacturing of these advanced products that are required by the auto industry. Now, while we say this, it is also important to realize that it is not possible for the industries to scale up to the level overnight that is expected, and the kind of turnover linked schemes that have been worked out has been really good, that it has been capped from various angles. It is capped from the investment angle, so there is a pressure on investment over the next 5 years, and is capped from a delivered sales value, DSV as they call it, primarily ensuring that the industry is able to scale up with the right levels of output and is able to give and get the benefits out of this whole scheme. So the scheme is linked, and if any one of this is not falling through, it's clear that you will not get the incentive. So it's clear that there is a pressure on investment to be done over a certain time frame over the next 5 years for OEMs. For the champion OEMs, it is up to 2,000 crores. For the non-champion OEMs, also it is up to 2,000 crores, but with a leeway of that they can start with 1,000 crores. Two-wheelers, three-wheelers is 1,000 crores. For auto component industry, it is 250 crores for the champion industries, and for the non-champion industries, it is 500 crores. So clearly, the government has thought about very clearly linking all this together so that they are able to get maximum cumulative investments. The idea is to get, while they incentivize this whole sector to a tune of around 26,000 crores, the idea is to get an investment of almost close to 42,000 crores. And the idea is also to get that it will improve the employability by almost close to 750,000 people, and will bring in a total production upgradation in terms of value to a tune of almost 230,500 crores, which is a huge impact to the economy. And this will mean that the incremental tax revenue for the government will be almost in the region of around 10,800 crores, after the 4th year, or it is expected in the 5th year. and then on it will scale up as the quantities scale up. So there is a clear linkage to investment. There's a clear linkage to sales. There's also a clear linkage to growth. If the growth percentage is less than 10% year on year, then also it will, you will fall short of getting the incentive. And at the same time, while this can happen, that some of the industries may benefit because of scale. Some of the industries may not benefit because of scale. So government has thought about it, and they have capped the maximum benefit that you can get to almost something like 6,400 crores, with a capping that a minimum value addition should be 50%. So I think the scheme has been very well thought of. It will ensure the leakages in the system that can happen with a scheme which is having, let's say, porous kind of a situation, will get avoided, and it will ensure that people are looking wholesome in terms of the overall business of all these advanced technologies to grow and to be able to take the economy to the required level. So while we talk about this overall incentive, it's also important for us to realize that the government has actually done much more indirectly to the industry by incentivizing separately the cell chemistry. The cell chemistry is incentivized to tune of almost 18,000 crores, and the semiconductor manufacturing has been incentivized to tune of almost 76,000 crores, which the parliament has already passed the bill. So with that, there is going to be a effect of the other schemes like the semiconductor scheme as well as the cell chemistry scheme, which will of course help the overall industry to develop in the areas of cell manufacturing, get into the areas of advanced cell chemistries, and get into the areas of areas other than lithium ion that we are dependent on, because if you are more dependent on lithium ion, our imports from China will only keep increasing. Nothing more will happen. So while all this has been done, I think kudos to the government for bringing in this scheme. I think it's going to really help the industry, is going to help overall economic development of the country. But while I have said this, we must also look at some of the areas that we feel could have also been addressed by the industry. And I would request, since Mr. Surinder Sinha is already there in this call, I'm sure some of the ideas that we are looking at could probably help in advancing this to the next level. One of the areas which I had in mind has been already captured by Mr. Angan Porat, which is innovation. Ideation to manufacturing is something that is very important. I'm very conversant with the infrastructure and the economic, let's say, atmosphere that exists in Israel, with all the accelerators and other processes by means of which innovations are enhanced, and at the same time the production of that is then subsequently improved to thereby improve the outputs. So I personally feel that having some kind of accelerated programs and incentivizing them so that people can come out with more ideas, and they may fail on those ideas, but it is important for people to come out with those ideas and try to see if they can commercialize it. Because when we come out with ideas is what is going to give in a lot of benefit to the industry in terms of scale up as well as in terms of usage of that technology. Whereas in the current circumstances, there is going to be an extra push on getting investments into the country, but at the same time, there'll be a push for getting a technology which is going to be a follow-through or a sourcing technology, which will only enhance probably some of the profitability of the partners. So we have to see how in the country we can increase the innovation angle and increase the funding that is possible to the innovation sector. While some of the schemes like Startup India and others are really going to help, but at the same time, I think they fall short from a viewpoint of giving capital incentive to the industry. So I feel that incentivizing the startup arena, ideation to manufacturing should be a direction that that the government can probably incentivize. That's point number one. Point number two, I feel some of the areas where the existing infrastructure. There are existing companies which are falling much below the, let's say, the minimum threshold of the 250 crores investment in the auto component segment, where there are a lot of ideation taking place and a lot of improvements and newer areas that have been looked into. I feel that there has to be a scheme which will incentivize the companies which are falling in this lower than 250 crores investment scale, and a minimum turnover of 250 or 500 crores as the scheme goes. So that will really help the industry to bring in a charged atmosphere amongst all the companies in the ecosystem, and will push them towards thinking differently. The third area is, I feel, there are also a lot of areas, the immediate need for the economy and for the country is to look at reducing carbon emissions. So while there has been a focus of incentivizing the after treatment, I feel there are many other ways which can improve carbon emission other than after treatment, and those are the areas that need to be looked into and incentivized. It could be usage of CNG, it could be usage of ethanol blending, it could be so many other things, which I think unfortunately has not been incentivized, which is the immediate need for the country. And I feel that looking at that area of development in the technology there, because IC engines are not going to go away overnight. It is going to stay there for some time, and the whole system is going to coexist. And it becomes very necessary for the government to also think about what they have in hand today, rather than look at all the birds in the bush. So I would expect that this area is also looked into by the government. The next area is, I think, while charging infrastructure in some way has been mentioned in the whole scheme, I feel a separate push is needed on the charging infrastructure. The primary focus that is required in this area is to ensure that the whole industry and the ecosystem is able to sustain the growth that may be expected in the coming years. Now, if we are going to fall short of power availability or charging infrastructure availability, the whole scheme of things of landing and putting a lot of money into incentivizing this area will completely get destroyed, or will not take the required shape as we want it to be taken. So I think incentivizing it in a different way, like they have done for the cell chemistry, will probably help the overall ecosystem, the auto ecosystem. And the last area I would like to look at is, there are a lot of new ideas and investments that are going in for developing, newer kind of materials, newer kind of, degradable materials, which I think is very important for the country to look at. And those usage of those materials, usage of those products into areas like plastic injection molding or other products that we make today in the vehicle industry will really help in a very big way in shaping that particular segment of the industry, which uses a lot of material which is not biodegradable. So I would really think that this is an area that needs incentivization, and some of these areas will really help in growing the ecosystem as well as the economy. So that's about it. I know I have limited time, so that's about it. But these are some of my immediate and initial thoughts, and we can discuss more on this as we go forward. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Krishna Kumar. I think very insightful talk from your side, having explained the PLI scheme in such a simple way, and mentioning about our wish list from the industry perspective. I think very good ideas, particularly incentivizing the startup arena and including the existing companies which right now do not qualify, and reducing carbon emissions, which is the need of the hour, and also special push for the charging infrastructure. I think that's a requirement of the industry as we march towards the EV era. So very, very interesting thoughts you have shared. So thank you for that. And
thank you, Mr. Kasi. Thank you.
And our next speaker is Mr. Ashim Sharma, Partner and Group Head, Business Process Improvement Group, NRI Consulting and Solutions India Private Limited. So over to Mr. Ashim Sharma. Thank you.
Thank you, Kalsisan, and very good evening to everyone. I'd like to thank ASSOCHAM for this opportunity to talk today about incentivizing advanced manufacturing in the automotive sector. I hope all of you can see my screen in full screen mode.
Yes, sir.
So I think the speakers before me, especially Mr. Krishna Kumar, touched very elaborately on what is being done by the government and what the industry is doing there. I'll try to throw a perspective on how some of the advanced manufacturing techniques are going to become imperative for the whole sector to prosper, and then finally drawing a comparison between what's happening in different parts of the globe and where we stand in India vis-a-vis some of the attributes that are needed to make advanced manufacturing a reality in the country. So moving on, I think I've just taken two examples here for advanced manufacturing that would be needed in the automotive sector. First and foremost, being cell-level manufacturing of batteries. It's the single most important thing that will be needed if we are to realize, high volumes of electric vehicles in the country, especially because we realize that given the global demand for batteries across sectors, this will grow to about 3 terawatt-hour by 2030. And while there is enough in the Earth's crust, the mines that have been developed are not enough to be able to take care of this kind of a demand, leading to a supply shortage and increase in prices. Therefore, smaller EV manufacturers would be at the receiving end because of this, not getting customized batteries or getting higher prices. Therefore, there is a need for technology infusion in the sector in the country so that cell-level manufacturing can take place within our borders. And the second one, which is being talked about even more these days around semiconductors. So as we know, the traditional vehicles rely more on the legacy nodes due to non-centralized or zonal architectures in vehicles, whereas the new investments in semiconductors are being made in the leading nodes. Therefore, this crisis is going to continue somewhere till 2023. So there's again a need to infuse technology so as to be able to find balance between which nodes OEMs move towards and what corresponding capacities we plan for in the country, for instance. So just two examples here, but both of them relying extensively on the use of advanced manufacturing and Industry 4.0. So just throwing a perspective on that, we know that Industry 4.0 as a concept will be transforming traditional manufacturing, creating highly automated, thoroughly integrated factory human-machine interface, and enhance the flexibility and customization in production. It will hinge on a bunch of enablers, whether it's big data, autonomous robots, IoT, cloud computing, additive manufacturing, and augmented reality. And some of the benefits that we are going to see are in terms of cost, quality, productivity, and flexibility. Touching very briefly on each of those, we see that big data analytics will help generate volumes of data from the shop floor, enabling us to identify patterns, to do effective problem solving. Also integrating data across the value chain will help improve visibility, optimize decision making, help in predictive maintenance, etc. Similarly, autonomous robots, and which is sort of a reality when we also talk about semiconductor manufacturing, could lead to those lights out factories operating 24/7, improve efficiency, speed, accuracy, and safety being some of the benefits of these. Also, IoT, I think oft talked about concept of connecting all machines on the shop floor to the internet, improves the effectiveness of big data analytics, helps in remote monitoring, AI-driven maintenance, etc. Similarly, cloud computing, the data generated can be accessed remotely, leads to cost savings, improvements in productivity, performance, data security, etc. Additive manufacturing, which is very close here, as we see, additive manufacturing had been employed so far for prototyping, and now we see this entering into mainstream production, leading to optimized product designs, faster time to market being some of the benefits. And finally, augmented reality, which helps superimpose virtual information on top of the existing real-world environment. So improves training, helps in quick resolution in case of issues. All of these will help in improving efficiency, reducing cost, and improving quality. Some of the examples from the auto industry of how these have benefited from BMW and Bosch, we see clearly there's been a reduction in time for deployment of new applications, reduction in quality issues, also cost savings being there. Moving on the adoption of this, well, there are certain challenges. Of course, technology being the first and foremost, a lower technology diffusion in production sectors of developing economies like India. Skill availability, another issue, finance availability, which was also touched upon by the first speaker, and also IT infrastructure and lack of digitization across the value chain. Moving on, this shows just a perspective of where the developing economies are and where the developed economies are. We clearly see, as we can see the lower part of this chart and the blue line there being India, that clearly there is significant amount of gap between the developed world and the developing world, and between India and some of those countries, whether it's in terms of financial services, infrastructure, or technology readiness. And that is something that we need to look at bridging. Similarly, when we come on global skills and innovation, again, we see that there is considerable amount of distance between the developing economies and the developed economies, and that is a gap, again, that needs to be bridged so as to be able to have a successful adoption of some of these technologies within the borders of the country. Also, we see that the different features of this are compatible with different sectors across the value chain. For example, in the automotive industry, agile supply chain with integration of a multi-echelon system. So OEMs, tier 1s, tier 2s, tier 3, so on and so forth, is something that can easily be facilitated by this. It will lead to benefits like self-monitoring capabilities, also AR, VR for customer experience, 3D printing. Of course, there is going to be the challenge of complete automation, data security, and end-to-end supply-demand integration due to the multi-echelon nature of the supply chain. When it comes to the semiconductor industry, which is also today a huge determinant of production volumes for the automotive industry, we see that precision manufacturing and accurate control of thermal and support parameters is greatly enhanced with the application of Industry 4.0, and therefore the benefits of AI, additive manufacturing, the lights out manufacturing all come in with the application of Industry 4.0. So clearly for the automotive industry and the semiconductor industry that we rely on, there are significant benefits that can be realized. And the same is the case with battery manufacturing as well. Now let's look at what's happening across the globe on account of Industry 4.0. We see that countries are moving around different axes. Say, for example, over-dependence on certain countries has caused disruptions in the supply chain, especially during COVID-19 and also due to earlier natural calamities and geopolitical tensions. So they want to nearshore the supply chain. There are risks involved in concentration of critical component sourcing in one country, so they're also trying to diversify that. Also, the countries have realized the loss of one manufacturing job causes losses of 3 to 4 in the overall economy, leading to governments incentivizing localized production. For example, we have also the PLI scheme and initiatives under self-reliance in India. Also, a skilled workforce development along with better infrastructure in developed economies is causing reshoring of the manufacturing, especially with the advent of 4.0. So developed economies are once again becoming attractive for manufacturing because of this. So if you look at what countries are doing, for example, Europe is viewing Industry 4.0 for the emergence of smart industry, taking a combination of people and technology to form a dynamic network of production. China, which is seeing an increase in labor and material costs, is rapidly increasing digitization to transform the outdated production methods that are there. For India, clearly, some of the issues around agility, productivity, and also new tech can be solved by getting in more and more of Industry 4.0. Singapore is also advancing to Industry 4.0 to leverage advanced analytics to improve productivity and reduce various costs such as manpower and maintenance, and therefore even companies are even thinking of going for manufacturing to Singapore. The US is considering it as a means to reshore manufacturing to protect jobs. Vietnam is seeing that it is geopolitically positioned in a way that it can drive manufacturing shifts to the country, and there through futuristic solutions, it will be able to improve labor productivity and promote the country's competitiveness. Taiwan, which already is a semiconductor hub and wants to advance to high-tech advanced manufacturing using Industry 4.0, and Japan, which has taken due cognizance of this, has moved towards operationalizing technologies towards smart manufacturing, and it has introduced the Industrial Value Chain Initiative in 2016 itself to connect even small and mid-sized companies across sectors through Industry 4.0. So finally, we see that a lot of things are happening in different parts of the globe. Yet there are some challenges that we need to bridge in India. So what is some of the things that the stakeholders could do in order to promote Industry 4.0 in the country? We clearly see the role of educational institutions in upgrading the curriculum with new courses, skill, and also setting up national skill development programs, and also leading innovation, which is a very important aspect in all of this, which Mr. Krishna Kumar also touched upon before me. What could organizations do? They could enter into global partnerships, also help in organization of industry clusters for quicker technology adoption, and also collaborate with, for example, with the ITIs, like many companies are doing, so as to provide vocational training and also apprenticeship programs around Industry 4.0. Then the role of industry representatives and unions. There is also a thought that probably digitization would lead to loss of jobs. So it is important to have some sort of a mediation between employees and organizations to understand the challenges, and therefore what sort of a reskilling is needed to improve employability, to improve also the conditions of working for people. And finally, and very importantly, the government needs to provide incentives for firms to upgrade to Industry 4.0. Also support smooth workforce transition when digitization and automation happens. And very, very importantly, promote industrial alliances and support international alliances to push for new technology adoption, which would be needed in some of the key areas that I also touched upon at the start of the presentation. And finally, providing the supporting infrastructure, whether it's the IT infrastructure, whether it's the cybersecurity framework, etc. Finally, ending with a case study of Germany and what they have been able to do in this area and promote Industry 4.0. We see the German National Academy of Science and Engineering advised politicians and the public on issues related to technical sciences and technology policy, and played a major role in drafting some of the policies for Industry 4.0. So the educational institution, the academia, has played a very proactive role in this. Organizations, for example, there's a BMW example here, how in 2010 itself, they got Deutschland Digital, to increase adoption of ICTs, expand R&D in the IT industry. Also, there were interventions targeting vocational training and higher education programs around Industry 4.0 by various firms such as Bosch, Rexroth, Festo, Zeiss, etc. The unions have also played an important role, and they developed a project called Arbeit 2020, which identifies key issues with Work Council with an aim to negotiate management on how to jointly address the challenges of digitization, and focuses on the areas of work conditions, skills, and training. And finally, and very importantly, the government introduced strategic initiatives under Industry 4.0 that focused on technology, economic, and social policy. And they also launched the German Ministry of Education and Research, BMBF, to strengthen and secure a leading position in research and innovation as a global production hub. And we see, as a result of this, the German manufacturing industry and the economy have benefited greatly. And probably there are some lessons for us out there also to adopt in India. With that, I reached the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for a patient hearing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Sarma, for a very, very relevant information covering different aspects of advanced manufacturing, including role of stakeholders and geopolitical disorder globally. You have given a lot of information, and I'm sure our participants have certainly taken it very positive way, and they have learned a lot out of this presentation. It was an excellent presentation on this subject. I thank you once again, and now I have great pleasure inviting Squadron Leader Prerna Chaturvedi, veteran Indian Air Force co-founder and director, Evolet India, to kindly share her views on the subject.
Many thanks, Mr. Rajora, and I think it's a proud privilege and honor to be amongst the very, very seasoned and professional players in this industry who've actually experienced and lived their lives in bringing the industry 4.0 to the fore. And actually, you all have been leading the change, whilst we as a startup have only experienced it, what actually is the ground reality of the industry 4.0. And I'm really, really happy with the way Mr. Ashim has covered all the aspects in such a methodical manner. Some of the things that he mentioned was the prime of my address today. And I firmly feel, Mr. Ashim, like you mentioned, this entire ecosystem will have to be translated into micro segments of action, and only then the entire industry can evolve towards marching forward. So it's not the larger aspect of doing 2,000 crores or looking at 6,400 crores in an entire country. It will have to be fragmented across pieces which do not seem significant right now in the larger perspective. As a startup in this industry, we firmly have seen that this industry gained momentum by the hubs of startups and incubators. It's only then that the learning was brought to the fore, that the product was actually ascertained. Whilst we would be able to name 10 or 12 large beneficiaries of the incentivization of the industry, we also know that there were 280 of those smaller startups and smaller industries which did not really benefit from any incentives, but were most instrumental in bringing the understanding to the industry as to what needs to be done. And this is the kind of learning that we all are sitting on today, that once the product has consolidated, the entire supply chain and the component development has now gravitated and found a new center of gravity, wherein we are now able to identify that the government will need to spell out on these. This much quantum would go into the component developments, and as much would need to be channelized towards the development and anchoring of the startups and the incubator hubs. And I am quite in firm belief with Mr. Ashim, like you said, picking up the threads from picking up the IIT hubs. This is where possibly we will need to draw it down to the micro level, so that the product development, the R&D to the component development all moves towards progressive industries. And just by virtue of sitting in a country like India, we can all benefit from the economies of scale that this country can offer, which no other countries, whether we look at Germany or China or Japan, would not be able to offer that kind of scale. Just by sheer numbers, if we look at the kind of larger percentage of vehicle operators on the streets, the largest contributors are the two-wheelers, and we can say it from our own personal experience. So going by the data that we can see that Niti Aayog had published, that there were about 78% of the users of automobiles on the roads were two-wheelers. And we have felt the change ourselves, that the moment you look at changing the technology and you bring in new industries into the domain to be able to aid the shift to electric mobility, this is the segment of the industry which was most responsive. And in this segment, if we look at the units that are sold every year, there's just 2.5 crores of new units, added by another 3.5 crores of pre-owned units. And all those would need to be converted into a new shift of electric mobility. And that is the kind of shift that will have to be aided by technology, by, of course, also enabling the users of the industry to be able to shift to that technology. So it's not only we face the challenge on an everyday basis at industry. It becomes harder for experienced people who are also adept at accepting newer technologies, because ultimately the last mile, I think the entire strength of the chain is going to be governed by the weakest link, which is going to be the people who are going to be drivers of this game. And this is where I think we all collaboratively, as our partners in this change movement, it's brilliant to share the panel with all of you. And then thank you very much, Mr. Rajora, to allow me to speak in between. I had to rush out for an important meeting. Thank you very much for allowing me the time and then rescheduling it. It's a pleasure and honor to be part of this panel, sir, and look forward to being associated with all of you.
Thank you, madam, so much. Focusing on the ecosystem and its need to transform, and of course, the technology change is a key aspect in, advanced manufacturing. And we also have noted that we need to enable the new users about the new technology. That is an important aspect which we have explained. And thank you so much. Now, I would request Mr. Sankar Acharekar, Deputy General Manager, Mahindra and Mahindra Limited, to please share his vision on the subject.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Rajora. Are you able to hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir. You are very well.
Thank you. Thank you. So, respected colleagues from the auto industry, good evening. This Indian auto industry has been questioned as a sunrise sector and a champion industry, and due to its immense contribution to that makes to the Indian economy, we all are aware. So I'll not repeat the numbers on the GDP, manufacturing GDP, and the GST revenues. But today, this industry at the crossroads. On one side, it is the advent of the next generation technology like electric vehicle, hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, and connected vehicles, which require large investment for the development. On the other side is the need to provide a sustainable, affordable, and accessible mobility to the India's hinterlands. This industry is also aware of the need of the reducing the dependence on the import oil bill. Over the years, industry it has made a significant investment in the indigenization of technologies, and the classic example is moving from BS4 to BS6 in just 3 years of time. The government of India, we all aware that is committed to reduce this emission intensity by 33 to 35% by 2030 from 2005 levels during COP21 summit held in Paris. The transport sector currently accounts around, say, close to 18% of the total energy consumption in India. So we are all aware that the government of India has made an ambitious commitment to the creation of the demand for the EVs through FAME, PLI Auto, and PLI ACC. Also, the promotion for the domestic manufacturing through National Mission on Transport Mobility and Battery Storage has supplemented the scheme. But the key barriers related to EV adoptions are technology costs, infrastructure availability, and the consumer behavior. Friends, you are aware that we are we are reached a time where from 100 years old conventional IC engines, now we are inching towards next generation technology. And localization of 50% is the biggest challenge what we feel that industry is likely to face. As correctly mentioned by Mr. Ashim, the new age requirement of battery and semiconductors. These two parts right now they account closely, I would say 45 to 50% of the vehicle cost. PLI ACC and PLI semiconductors are in place, but to get the products rolled down and to locally produce, it's going to take some 1 or 2 years time. So friends, this is going to be a biggest challenge for the industry to meet a 50% localization ambitious target what government India has said. So challenges are there, but industry has shown the great resilience in the past and has moved from rank 15 to rank 5 in the last 21 years. We have achieved this despite highest taxation among the top 5 countries in the world. We wish industry should aspire to be among the top 2 countries by 2047 across all the segments, PV, CV, 3-wheelers and 2-wheelers. Wish you all the best. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Shankar Acharekar, for mentioning the pain points of the industry, particularly with respect to taxation and other views with respect to the investments and the steep targets from the government. So very, very interesting insights from your side. And now may I invite Mr. Venkateswaran Sundar, Head Automotive OE and EV Business, JK Fenner India Limited. Mr. Venkateswaran.
Good evening. Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm Sundar from JK Fenner. I hope I'm audible. Kindly do let me know if I'm unable to hear me. I'm responsible for the automotive business out here, and thank you for this opportunity to express my views and thoughts. Yeah, as stated by everybody, the PLI scheme has been is certainly a path-breaking one and will certainly be a key driver of growth for the automotive industry in the next few years. However, having stated that, there's one of the key objectives in this discussion has been to what do we do further beyond the PLI scheme? Are there opportunities in the automotive industries that need to be incentivized? So when we look at it beyond the PLI scheme and from that perspective, I think one of the recent reports which I read, there are nearly about 30%. I mean, the combined imports of all suppliers in India is nearly 30% of their revenue, or something equivalent to 1 lakh crores. Spread across, in categories like transmission, steering, engine components, high strength steel, special types of steels, rubber parts, surprisingly, tooling, etc. So this raises a very different question. What do we do? I mean, we are also in very disruptive times. We have the EV threat, etc. But what, in my opinion, is if we go down, drill down this list and find the components which are not likely to be affected by EV disruption. For example, transmission components or rubber components, tooling and die capability, things like this will need to be focused, as not only it will help our competitors in the EV industry, but also in the existing industry, it will build up our capability. And further, we are also speaking about, growing our exports twofold. Apart from, localization, we are also speaking of exports, doubling our exports. And to double our exports, we all know that, we need to be highly competitive. We are still a very small player in the global component industry. And of course, there is a certain opportunity which is blowing our way. And as many of us in the automotive industry over the last about 12 to 18 months have seen a good rise in exports, but there is still a long way to go. Now, as we say this, what do we do? As the topic rightly says, advanced manufacturing techniques and incentivization. How do we do this? A few thoughts maybe. I mean, a few thoughts which I have, one of the things which we have been always talking is setting up of automotive clusters. Maybe we need to set up some high-tech automotive clusters where established players can set up their incubation centers. They can probably collaborate with startups. Startups can be incentivized to start on their own. And, and the other one, area which we generally tend to ignore is the tier twos. Tier twos also need to be motivated to come here. And, this high-tech centers can be focused on, can be very specific. Each cluster can focus on a certain area, maybe one for transmission or one for rubber components, etc. Because we could create an ecosystem where even if a small startup, if it comes in let's say a rubber cluster, it would have the benefit of a government facility where there are some common infrastructure which could be shared. And then that would help the entire development process for anybody who's there in the cluster. Beyond this, what we also need to do is, we could also probably create joint committees between the government and the clusters, where whatever hurdles are there specific to this cluster, that they can be addressed, because each cluster would have its own unique set of problems. Support tier two, because tier two is going to be a very key part. The last 20 years, tier ones have been the focus. Tier twos need a lot of work to be done to improve our overall competitiveness in the automotive industry. And so we need to support tier two in this, and maybe process automation, industry 4.0, etc. Whatever we speak for tier ones are a big challenges for tier two. And how do we incentivize this for them to adopt these technologies and be a good support both for the tier one and also for the automotive OEM would be a good thing to be evaluated. Hence, in my opinion, it's sort of a combination approach. There is certainly a disruption, but there is still enough opportunities for localization. And this components, whatever has come out very clearly, which could be very common with the EV industry or whatever disruptions are likely to happen, need to be focused and driven. So this a small, limited thoughts from my side, and thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, Mr. Venkateswaran, for your insights. May I now request our next speaker, Mr. Sunil Bhatnagar, Director, International Business, Emerging Technologies, Sunwaru Technology Limited. Over to Mr. Sunil Bhattacharya, please.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Rajora. Good evening, Mr. Kalsi, and good evening, all friends and respected members on the dais. So this topic is very interesting, and lot of coverage has already been taken. So I will give only the points which are not covered. So government is playing a very proactive role by giving this all incentive schemes, whether it is for scheme 2 or whether it is for PLI scheme for advanced chemistry cell batteries, or for this thing PLI scheme for AAT. So many schemes are coming, and this all will boost our domestic production. That is the biggest point. It will create a proper ecosystem, because presently we all are discussing about lot of imports happening. So government has come up with a PMP account phased manufacturing program, and now most of the things like batteries we are making in India, BLDC motors, other things, chargers we are making. Some component is still coming from outside, so that we are gearing up to localize, and all these incentive programs will boost this gearing up exercise. So this will attract a lot of investment in the manufacturing chain, and it will generate a lot of employment also, because so many companies are investing so much of money, and so much big plants will be coming. So a lot of employment will be generated, and a lot of revenue will be generated to government through taxation and to the companies who are doing all this exercise. And this will benefit the end customer also, because now once you make everything local, then you make quality as per the Indian standards, because homologation is a very big topic, and especially for automobiles, homologation is a very important exercise. So if we make in India, we know the conditions of road, we know the condition of vibration, and we know everything that how it moves here. So we can create a better product through this thing. So this is a welcome thing which is happening, and this PLI scheme for AAT is mostly covered. So I will cover more on PLI scheme on ACC batteries. So here we have a fund allocation of 18,100 CR, and presently we see for last 3-4 years we are doing very good in lithium batteries, but the bottleneck is lithium cell, and we generally import it from outside. It could be a NCM cell, or it could be a lithium iron phosphate cell. So all these cells are made outside. So now with this scheme, our government has given a clear focus to make cells in India. So we have many options here available. Like if we talk of a aluminum ion cell, so here the biggest plus point is that we have the raw material available locally, because India is rich in aluminum. So we need not import other metals from outside to make a lithium cell, because we are short of lithium, we are short of cobalt, nickel, and everything. So new technologies are coming. Similarly, we have hydrogen fuel cell for automotives. So this also we can do the generation, and a lot of new companies have shown interest in it already. The present pain point is its slight high running cost presently, but the type of production and the type of capacity which is coming in India will take care of that, and then it will match to the cost of running what we are having today in kilowatt hour from lithium. So that will be addressed accordingly. So we have many more advanced cell chemistry, like sodium ion is another interesting technology which is coming up, and it is as similar as lithium iron phosphate, because here also the cell voltage is 3.2, and the cycle life is again close to 2000 cycles at 100% DOD, and the sodium cell also behaves almost similar. And here you have a pouch form, so they will have a better energy density, and they are very safe. That is the biggest plus point, because in lithium even we see some cases of accident in NCM technology, especially lithium iron phosphate generally pass the criteria of AIS 048. So it is a safe technology. We do nail penetration test and everything, and it passed that test. But if you talk of NCM, there are issues, because India is a high temperature country. So when you discharge, then again the temperature will go up by another 5-7 degree. So already ambient is 48, 49, and the temperature will go up. So you see some cases of accident there. So government has given us a lot of opportunity here to implement these schemes, to develop the things locally. And apart from PLI, we have that demand incentive of FAME2, that is slightly older scheme, but that scheme is giving a big boost to the EV industry basically. So we have a 10,000 crore fund there available, and there is an incentive of 10,000 rupees per kilowatt hour on all vehicles. And of late, the government has increased it to 15,000 rupees per kilowatt hour in two-wheelers. Because you see, most of the population is two-wheeler. If you see the analysis of electric vehicles, around 75 to 80% sale is of two-wheeler only. So the government has taken a call on that, and the incentive has been increased to 15,000 rupees. Similarly, if you see of and we talk of mass mobility, because that is the most important part here to control carbon emission and to control on other factors of pollution. So in mass mobility, the government is giving a scheme of 20,000 rupees per kilowatt hour for electric buses. So that is a very big boost for this thing, and to match the cost and to give that kind of thrust to the industry so that everybody come forward and contribute here. So these are very important points. And for getting all this FAME scheme and everything, government has also set standards of battery, because everybody can't take this incentive. So you have to give a 3-year warranty on the battery, and the battery should be tested by any of the approved labs like ARI or ICAT or equivalent lab like NETRIP or GARC, or there are 3-4 labs in India from where we can get this testing done. So see, these are very important parameters, and especially this battery consists of around, if you take example of any EV, the cost of battery is close to 40% in a EV. So if we localize it, then I think this is the biggest challenge we are addressing, because balance are electronic parts like a motor or a controller or a charger. So those parts are not going to wear out that fast, but battery is only the consumable part which we have to take care. Similarly, there are other schemes which are coming for creating charging infrastructure, because another bottleneck when we talk of electric vehicles is the charging infrastructure. So new schemes are coming on that also, and government has allocated some fund on that also. Like Delhi government is giving a benefit of 6,000 rupees on installation of a charger. So a lot of state governments are giving different schemes. Similarly, center is giving different kind of scheme. So these all are important thing. Simultaneously, we are seeing the use of ethanol has increased now in our country. So earlier it was 6-7%. Now the target is to increase it to 20%. So flexi fuel cars and vehicles will be on road in coming 6-8 months. So that will also give a big boost to our environment and control pollution, because we all discuss about the SDG 7 targets and goals, and we all need to contribute on that. So battery electric vehicles and hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, and these all are very important basically to control the environment and to control the cost and make it viable for the general public to use. So similarly, we have PMP scheme where this is the phase manufacturing programs. So this all is giving a very big boost and incentivization to the automotive industry. Similarly, the government has kept a tax of 5% only on electric vehicles, whereas general tax on automobiles is 28%. So you can see the differentiation that how the tax barrier is there, though 28% is very high tax. But you see with this, this is a kind of indirect incentive basically to come to battery electric vehicles, because the focus of this scheme, the PLI schemes and all this FAME and everything is your battery electric vehicle. So that is the focus area. And I think I have covered all those points which because I don't want to repeat on PLI of automotive and other things. So I have covered other points, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bhatnagar. Thank you so much for appreciating the government initiatives, government schemes, and also giving your perspective on the PLI for batteries and problems in this segment, and your approach to manage such challenges. Thank you indeed for this. And before I request our chief guest, Sri Sudhendu Sinha sir, I would request Mr. Anandi Sinha President, Group Corporate Affairs, Minda Industries, to please give his perspective on the subject.
Good evening to all. I'm feeling really privileged and happy being amongst the August gathering of Shri R.S. Kalsi ji, Suvendu Sinha ji, Rajora ji, and all other renowned dignitaries. There are plenty of schemes which is initiated and which lead to Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat and everything. And my predecessors have covered most of the things and not left anything for me. But even then, I will try to put something from my side, especially the what auto component industry is looking for the solutions. We have the auto component champion PLI scheme, which will be the announced. The final shortlisting will be announced in another couple of weeks' time. Automotive OEMs has been announced, but auto components is yet to be announced. There are approximately 86, 87 applicants. We do hope that all the genuine applicants will get through the process. There are other things which need a sector-specific resolution and support from government of India and the respective agencies. First is we have a very competitive environment. Kalsi-san and all others who come from the automotive sector, they know it very well that we operate in a very, very competitive environment, and it's a cutthroat competition. And rising costs due to ever-increasing features and customer expectation is becoming a very major concern for all of us. And we expect suitable measures to control the rising input costs with the specific raw materials so that industry is not suffering and the growth engine is continuing to grow faster. Another thing is in the policy, the localization threshold is given 50%, which is wishful thinking, but due to the shortage of semiconductors and electronic components, which are being basically imported and constitute major portion of our raw material bin, this is a really difficult target to achieve for all of our friends and sector colleagues. Another things which in the initial ATT list, it was 103 products which were given by the Ministry of Heavy Industries as which will be taken care in this policy. We feel that this need to be relooked and this product list need to be extended furthermore. Especially keeping in view the import substitution, because there's if you know that there's a lot of import is being in the automotive sector. So instead of curtailing the import and restricting, we should subsidize and incentivize the import substitution product, and we should bring all those products in the PLI scheme and extend the coverage and scope of the schemes with a special focus on export substitution also. That is the need of the hour also. Few years back, the R&D, which were the major expense in our sector, we keep on researching and developing new products. IT benefits were withdrawn. We earnestly request the government and the finance ministry to restore and encourage the R&D investment so that we can invest more and more and reap the benefit of the R&D investment. My colleagues have already taken care of the comprehensive policy of EV charging station points, and Mr. Bhatnagar was just now mentioning. And whatever the data I have, this year we will be closing with 2 lakhs two-wheelers in EV sector. Another 2 years, this figure will reach 1 million plus. So we will need sufficient EV charging station and point. Similarly, the four-wheeler will also grow in this, not in the same fashion, maybe better, maybe similar fashion. We also faced a lot of shortage of containers during last 2 years, and because of that, the supply chain issues are taking place. And last but not least, we depend on our MSME and Tier 2 producers, and there is a need to focused approach for MSME and Tier 2 producers, because they are the backbone of our industry, and we should not miss caring them and taking care of them so that they are comfortably providing the support to the Tier 1 manufacturer, and ultimately OEMs are being benefited. That's all for this session, and thank you very much, Rajora-san, for giving me opportunity to speak here.
Thank you, Mr. Sinha, for giving nice insights from the viewpoint of automobile component manufacturers, and also highlighting the pain points and the wish list from that perspective. So thank you very much. And now I have a great pleasure to welcome Mr. Sudhendu Sinha, Advisor, Infrastructure, Connectivity, Transport and Electric Mobility, Niti Aayog, who is at the center stage when it comes to defining the policies for our country in the field of infrastructure, connectivity, transport, and electric mobility. So may I welcome you, Mr. Sudhendu Sinha, and request you to take charge of the stage. Over to Mr. Sinha, please.
Thank you, Mr. Kalsi, and thanks to all the other distinguished members of ASSOCHAM for organizing this particular webinar. My apologies that I could not be there from the beginning, but yes, some of the points that you have come on a kind of unanimous scale, you can always refer it to us, and we are right here to take care of it. Now, you are watching yourself the way government is taking it ahead. I should not be sounding like a spokesperson of government, but yes, in the field of automobile, some facts are convincing for one and all. If we are world's largest manufacturer of two-wheelers, three-wheelers and tractors, second largest in the field of buses, third in trucks and fourth in cars, there is every reason that the necessary thrust ought to be given to this particular sector. Even in the area of, for example, the automobile components, the way we are taking it, that is really awesome. Now let's see what is the grand aim of the government. The grand aim is that the product, whether it is a part, it is a component or the complete vehicle, it has to have the best of the quality. So that if we say that it has been made in India, that means that it should be a mark of respect. It should have a kind of, it should be an object where the people all over the world, they want to have it with them. So that sort of quality is that aspirational quality we are looking for. Second is that in the process of achieving that quality, you must ensure, and I saw that the last two interventions, it is so clearly mentioned, that localization factor has to be there. You can't be leaving your country behind. Lot of localization, make in India effort has to be there. And finally, it is that it has to be sustainable. In the process of manufacturing, you're not kind of degrading the environment and other factors. You develop things that can be easily stitched into renewables. In the manufacturing process also, you try to use as much renewable as available as applicable. Now, with this mindset, with this kind of approach, government has initiated a number of projects. You saw, I can name a number of them. The national mission was set up to drive it in a kind of focused way, the national mission on transformative mobility and battery storage, especially for the electric vehicles. And of course, then it was a PLI scheme, FAME scheme. FAME was the second version came. That version was also re-strategized with different strategy for different vehicle segments. The PLI scheme was again focusing on advanced chemistry cell and also on automobile components. If you connect all these dots together, then you will see for yourself that it is completely providing a kind of end-to-end support. And I must congratulate the entire industry, ASSOCHAM in particular, because many of the times your inputs, we have been able to take them, kind of stitch them, kind of embed them in the policy, and then we have taken it forward. So the idea is very clear. Tremendous trust is there on the industry that you are the ones who are going to take it forward. You are the ones who are going to make India a kind of globally best in automobile. But also qualitatively, the supply chain with a very, very robust kind of supply chain, and price, of course, it has to be affordable. Otherwise, we lose that global advantage. It has to be affordable. What I suggest to all the industry people, industry captains who are here, because you have to also look beyond the domestic market. So in addition to the market that is available in India, you should also be thinking about the market that is available in our neighborhood and how to have a kind of deep penetration into them, how to bring more revenues from them so that that enriches our country. And of course, I did mention earlier about the quality, I mentioned about localization, I mentioned about sustainability. R&D was being mentioned, correct? Lot of, from Niti Aayog side, we are kind of nudging many of the institutes, countries' institutes, for example, the IITs, to take R&D in a fast forward way. And we are also attempting that the CTOs of different automobile giants, they should be connected to them. And this R&D initiative should not be one of those laid back, luxurious kind of R&D where you create a professorial chair for 5 years. No, it has to be working on a very, very specific problem statement where in a given time period, they are expected to come out with solutions that could be acceptable, implementable, and that could be taken forward in the manufacturing. That is the kind of thing we are taking forward. The best thing is, and of course, it is more emphatic in electric mobility, electric vehicles, that the states are also having their own policy. So states are also kind of committing themselves to the electric vehicles, to the electric vehicle components. And that is why majority of the states, they want industries to be with them. And that is the reason why they are now ready. They are rather, that readiness is with alacrity to come out with a lot of land and trunk infrastructure, lot of subsidies, lot of other incentives, subsidiary incentives for industry, for automobile industry, I'm telling you precisely, to be with them so that they are aware that this would bring a lot of investment, this would create a lot of employment opportunities, and at the end of the day, it is going to bring prosperity for the state. And very soon, we will be informing you also that we are going to organize one such conclave at Una in Himachal, because they want it to be developed, a kind of auto component hub kind of space they want to develop. And of course, that in that conclave, we will be seeing that how it takes forward. So what I'm trying to say, and similarly, many states are coming out with such kind of interventions, such initiatives where they want to attract industries. At least we have been able to achieve that much, that we have brought states in sync with our own aspirations. And now they are, rather I would say they are more aspirational. They are always in the process of recalibrating their existing policies so that they do not lag behind from any other state and they are able to attract you, they are able to facilitate the entire manufacturing that you want to take forward. And finally, I would say that this entire achievement, what we take pride in and sing for, this cannot be a sole credit of us. This is a kind of, I always emphasize it in a different seminar and webinars, that this is a joint effort, this is a team's effort. And in this team, you are the most prominent player. Based on you only, on your strength only, we are just providing the regulatory support, some initial incentives in the same way as a student is provided a scholarship, but it is not that he is studying for the scholarship. He is studying for some better things. Scholarship is only an enabler. Similarly, these incentives, these rules, this regulatory framework, it is only meant for that. And yes, we are always by your side. Wherever you feel the pinch, please get back to us. We'll try to think through it. We'll try to rationalize it. We'll try to see that it is brought to a logical conclusion. So congratulations again to you, Mr. Kalsi, and to all the distinguished members of ASSOCHAM and ASSOCHAM as such. so that you are taking it forward. And a lot of trust is there on you. You can't be failing us, you see, as simple as that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir, for reposing that faith in the industry, and also, giving us, this thing, reinforced vision about localization, about quality of Make in India products, sustainability, renewable energy mindset, and certainly I would like to say that the PLI scheme, FAME 1, FAME 2 are really putting industry on a fast track towards achievement of the mission and vision of our Prime Minister and Niti Aayog, and the end-to-end support that is being provided through the policies of Niti Aayog. And certainly, it's very important for us, having faced the current situation in terms of, say, semiconductor shortage impacting the industry, the global supply chain crisis during the pandemic, that it's very important for us to localize with high quality and certainly with very competitive cost structure. So we have to look beyond domestic market. I think very good insights were provided, sir, and deeper penetration. Your focus on R&D, particularly with the IITs, to be put earlier. Actually, R&D was being looked upon as a slow-moving department anywhere in the industry or in the institutes also. But putting it on a fast track today is very important in today's agile environment. There's a need of the hour. And certainly, sir, the joint effort with inclusive approach of the industry and the government, we have a very, say, aggressive plan, very bright future with this kind of a mission and this kind of policies. And once again, I thank you, sir. And I'm, sure that on behalf of ASSOCHAM, Auto OEM and Auto Ancillaries group, I can mention that we are all there to support government in these great initiatives. So thank you very much for these insights. And now I hand over the stage back to Mr. Rajora. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Kalsi. With great pleasure, I join Mr. Kalsi in proposing a very hearty vote of thanks to our chief guest, Sri Sudhendu Sinha sir. Sir, we are indeed grateful to you for very kindly accepting our request and sparing your valuable time this afternoon from your very busy schedule and sharing your vision on this important subject. It was indeed highly informative to the industry. ASSOCHAM shall be glad to join hands with the government in all its initiatives on this subject, sir. I also place on record our sincere thanks to all the eminent speakers and participants to this webinar. Thank you all once again, and my special thanks to Niti Aayog, Sri Sudhendu Sinha sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.